Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast. This episode, I am Greg the Single Guy, and I do have Kent the Cat Guy with me. How you doing, Kent?
Hey, I'm great. Good to see you, Greg.
All right, and JP's in the house from Mexico. How you doing, JP?
Hello from Canada this time. Still in Canada.
Oh, you're still on vacation in Canada.
I'm still on vacation. I'm in a basement, if you can't tell. For those of us that are watching the video version, this is a basement.
Blink twice if you need to send help.
I forgot where. The code word is Oklahoma if you need help, JP. If they let you out of the basement during the show, feel free to leave us, okay?
Okay.
But anyway, we'd like to introduce, speaking of Canadians, our guest to this episode is Dr. Hayley Watson. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
And you are coming to us from Los Angeles, but you are Canadian. So I was hoping, and we'll talk about your book a little later, but I was hoping that you could give us the 411, the elevator version of how you got into education and what you're doing now.
Yeah. Do you want the personal version or the professional version?
I don't know. I'm still trying to get used to myself on video because I forgot. We're not just like I want to pick my nose or something. Let's do the whatever you choose, the quick version, the elevator. Be yourself.
The quick version. Okay, so the quick version is so I guess let's start with what I do in education, and then we'll work backwards.
Cool.
So it makes sense to the listeners. So I am a clinical psychologist. And what I do in education is I create mental health programs for schools. So I work with schools all over the world, or my organization does, and we provide resources so that teachers can teach their students mental health skills. So that's kind of my involvement in education. And I work a lot with teachers and principals and superintendents, and I absolutely love connecting with educators. So I do it all the time, but I'm not physically in a school.
That is huge. That is such a needed service right now because as teachers, we're not equipped with the ability to do this really.
Absolutely. And so that's the really big problem that we're trying to solve is how do we make sure an entire generation learns these really, really important skills that we know young people need now without putting this huge burden and pressure on teachers to all of a sudden become an expert in something that we didn't know this stuff when we grew up. This is not something that was in our world. It was not something that's in teacher training programs. So there's this really big gap that's really challenging for both students and teachers. So that's sort of the the end of the story. But how I got there is, so I have a big passion for helping young people. And usually those of us who have this passion have gone through things when we were younger that weren't that pleasant. So I had some pretty serious trauma that I experienced when I was really little, that really shaped my experience as a young person. And I became one of those kids that was a bit of a perfectionist and a straight A student and, a people pleaser as a result of kind of going through hard things. And so nobody knew that I was struggling. I didn't even know that I was struggling. And so it was only when I left school and I went out into the world, things started to fall apart because, I didn't have the skill set to really make choices that were in line with my best interests and things started going off the rails. There's a whole story about sailing across the South Pacific. You guys would like that, Jimmy Buffett fans.
Fin celeb. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I got in, hitchhiking and motorcycle riding, just like doing things that were very fun, but also kind of, in some ways self-destructive. And then started to figure out, oh, okay, I'm playing out some patterns because I feel certain ways, because I'm scared, because of things that happened to me, et cetera, et cetera. Figured all that out and then started being able to kind of really fulfill my purpose. And so having gone through that journey, I became really passionate about how do we help kids learn this younger? And how do we make sure we're not only helping the kids that are really obviously, throwing things at the wall? Because obviously those kids need support, but every single one of us. And the more I kind of got into this, and then of course working as a psychologist, and I've done work in other places in the world with young people, really just seeing we're all in pain. We all have levels of trauma, whether they're big or small, and we all end up kind of doing things that aren't necessarily the best things for us. And if we could just learn when we're younger how to recognize, oh, I'm doing this because I don't feel that great about myself, or I'm doing this because I'm thinking this thought that's actually totally untrue, or I'm limiting myself because I don't think I can do something that actually I can do. If everybody learned those skills, I mean, what kind of a world would that be? And what kind of a future are we then setting kids up for? So sorry, that wasn't totally short, but it is. I promise you that was
but that was terrific.
Dr. Hayley, a question for you. Mm-hmm. Has this always been the case with young people, or has it become more pronounced as time has gone by?
So it's really hard to answer that, because you could say that we're seeing it now, so we're paying attention to it, so it's coming up more. But also the world is getting more and more intense for young people at a younger and younger age. And we all know, social media, the impacts of that, the impacts of kids having to grow up so much younger and just being exposed to things so much younger. So I think both are probably a bit true. I think we are noticing it more now. So probably a lot more kids were struggling in previous generations, but the message they got was bottle it up. And so that's what they did. Whereas the message young people
suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up, buttercup. Exactly. But it really is important to recognize, like when I was a kid, I was able to be a kid till I was about 15. In the sense of I grew up in a small town in Canada. I wasn't exposed to body image stuff. I wasn't exposed to all of that, intensity of people observing me, or objectification, or the craziness that's happening in the world. I was very, very innocent and naive. And there's
just moose and loons and snowmobiles, right?
Exactly.
We love Canada. We have to make a little fun of it.
Oh yeah, please.
But you didn't have that. You're in a small town. You didn't have that kind of, during those times, you didn't have that kind of
really are like, I
social
literally
pressure.
Absolutely walked to school through the woods for like an hour, watching the daisies. Like it was, that doesn't really exist in a lot of places in the world now. And I look at kids growing up now, and they really have to be aware of themselves in a different way. And there's so much more pressure, and the pressure to be liked, and the pressure to look a certain way, and all of that kind of stuff. So that absolutely is having an impact. But at the same time, I think universally as humans, we do struggle with our mental health, and we're just now starting to recognize that and factor that in and see. And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it shapes us. Like for me, there's this really great silver lining. Ooh, what are all the great things that I've been able to do because of the things I've been through? But the shadow side is, if we don't really maximize that and dive into that and really almost like mine that experience, then it just takes us down a path that we're not really conscious of.
And the hardest thing is that you, as a psychologist, as an educational psychologist, in a setting, you can help out certain individuals, but like our school might have 1,200 kids. Exactly. So how do we have one educational psychologist. I just talked to him the other day, and he's split up between 4 different schools. He has only a little bit of time, and we have 1,200 students with an array of things to help, that need to be identified, first of all, and to be provided for. So how do you manage this? I mean, you don't work in a school, do you?
No, exactly. And what you described is exactly the reason that we created the resources that we did, because doing it that way, which is what we do in our culture, we wait until there's signs and symptoms. We try to, find the people that quote unquote are the ones struggling. And then we put everyone else in the you're okay basket. And then we try to funnel those people through, the tiered model of support. Okay, let's give them the intervention, which is really important. We need that. We do need that individualized, dedicated intervention and support for kids that really are at that pointy end. But what we're kind of forgetting is we need to actually provide a base level of skills and awareness to everyone. It would sort of be like in a school setting saying, okay, let's just wait until people can't read at all. Then we'll teach them how to read. So let's just pick out the ones that can't read, and then let's not teach them English. Let's wait and see.
It's got to be hard, because as a homeroom teacher, which I'm not anymore, I've been a homeroom teacher. Kent is a homeroom teacher right now in 4th grade. and the listeners know about that. But as a fourth grade teacher, he's swamped. I mean, he's going bat crazy on a regular day, and then to have 27 to 40, some people have 40, whatever students. And how do you? I guess that's what your book is all about, and we could talk about that and the open parachute and all of these things, because it sounds like you are reaching out to the homeroom teacher and other parents and individuals that want to help, right?
Yeah, so
the base.
Absolutely. So what it is a school or a school district, so in your case, international schools, the school would decide to adopt our program, and then the resource would be provided to each teacher. And then it's a class. So this is the thing that's really important, that we don't just dump it all on that homeroom teacher and say, well, figure out how to deal with all of these fires that are coming at you and put them out one by one. We say, okay, as a school, we know this is really important. We can see students are struggling. We are going to set dedicated time. This is really important. The school leader needs to be on board and say, we are going to have a class where we learn mental health skills, just like we learn every other subject. And then once a week, we're going to come into that class. And if you're using a resource like ours, Open Parachute, you actually, in ours, you get to hear stories of peers. You get to hear other kids talking about something they've been through. And then you actually go through a skill set. This is a skill you need. You need to be able to change your thoughts when you're having a negative thought.
Like case studies.
Exactly. And then it's a skill set. It's mental health skills. So it's what you do learn when you go to a psychologist, but it's generalizing it and normalizing it. So it's saying not only people who are at the very end of their rope need to learn these skills, we all need to learn these skills. And so that's why it's really important it's treated as a whole school approach. That takes the burden and pressure off each individual teacher, because then the students have a skill set. Then when those students in fourth grade in homeroom come to you and say, I'm struggling with this or that, you can say, okay, let's draw on the skills you've already learned because we've already taught you. And I can just remind you of something you can do, versus trying to figure out A, what the heck is going on with you? B, what on earth am I supposed to suggest here? And you're kind of floundering. And so the resources are all about teaching that skill. And then the book is all about when that student does come to you, what are some specific things you can say and how can you respond in these different situations? They're depressed, they're anxious, they're, struggling with school, whatever the struggle is. What are the things that I can say as a teacher, knowing I'm not a psychologist, but can I say a few things that are helpful? So it's trying to approach it from those two angles, teach the skill set, and then empower teachers with some language they can have in those moments. So you're not sort of in that moment going, what am I supposed to do here? How can I possibly say something helpful?
And what I like about that is that you're talking about, from what I understand, you're talking about the school as an environment. Yeah. So it's not just the homeroom teacher, it's the whole school. So it might be a person, it might be a specialist. It has a little extra time, because when it happens and if they notice that somebody's feeling down, it's not just go see the counselor. It's more like take a moment and maybe have an idea, maybe some strategies in a toolbox to identify that this little boy or little girl needs some help that moment. Instead of just saying, go to the counselor, you could say, I'm going to take you aside for a second, listen to you, and maybe here's a comment, and then go to the counselor if you need to.
Exactly. And when you think about 100%, because when you think about what really helps a young person, when you think about that model of, you have an upset feeling, there's only one person that can help you with that. And it's a specialized person. And it's something that is so bizarre that I, as an adult, can't even comment on it. What is that? What message does that send? That sends the message of, oh my gosh, what I'm going through is not something that's normal. It's not something that people can cope with. And the majority of the time when kids are struggling with something, we can help in the moment. It is usually something that's not such a big deal, but they're just struggling with it. Like, we struggle to learn things. We struggle with peer dynamics. We struggle with social interactions. And so if we can have everyone in the system being able to have that ability to confidently share those things, because that's the other piece. We need to empower teachers, because it's not fair to say, just say something helpful when there's no training around that. So
they won't say anything helpful. It's going to be like, oh, that's too bad. Wait till you get to your homeroom, or wait till you get to the counselor. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And this girl or boy is just destroyed by something, right?
Exactly.
I'm sorry,
Dr. Hayley, let me ask you this question. What is some of the mistakes that, good intended parents or good intended teachers who generally, they want to help our students? We realize there's a problem, but what are some of the common mistakes and some of the things that you've seen that maybe we should think about carefully?
I love
Good
this
question.
question. That's actually the first time anyone's asked it that way, and I love
He's
that.
good at
Usually people
questions,
say, what
isn't
should
he?
we do? But I love
Yes,
the,
he's
what
so
do we
good.
do that's not helpful?
He's so
Absolutely.
good.
Yes. So, and it's really important to start by saying this is human nature. We all do this. It's okay if we're doing this. Like we all, we will do this even when we know not to do this. So it's just about course correcting each time. But some of the things that we typically do are, first of all, it's usually because we are uncomfortable with what's happening. And that's normal, right? If someone's really upset or if someone's really aggressive or whatever it is, that makes us really uncomfortable. And so we will usually react in whatever way we react to our own stress and discomfort. So this is really important. So if we are someone that typically suppresses our own emotions, and we have a student in front of us that's really showing a display of emotions, we will probably shut them down without realizing it. So we might say something like, oh, you're fine, it's not that big of a deal. Because that's the kind of language we usually use with ourselves,
Totally.
and it
done
feels
that.
like it just
Oh.
shuts it down, right? It's fine, don't make a big deal of it, And again, this is really normal and common, but what that says to the student is, I'm not seen, my feelings aren't valid, and they don't matter, and I don't matter, essentially, is kind of the message that we get in that situation. So that's one of them. Another one is where we really try to get into the story, and this is really common too. So someone's come to us with an experience, or they're overwhelmed or something, and instead of helping them manage their reaction, which is what we want to do, we want to help them go, okay, it almost is irrelevant what happened. What's important here is that you are having an emotional reaction to this, and you're reacting in a certain way, and I want to help you relate to that. Instead, we go, what happened? Tell me who did it. And
Get
we
all the
go into this
details.
sort of like,
Yeah.
what are the details of the story, which just escalates them further. And then we try to fix it for them. Well, let me just make that better. Let me intervene. Let me, because again, it's what we do with ourselves, and I'm very guilty of that. When something's wrong, I just want to fix it, make this feeling go away.
Yep.
I'm thinking, I'm sitting here going, get out of my mind, Hayley.
Yes.
You
Leave
are
me alone,
in my
Hayley.
mind. All of those things happen. Okay, so we're not supposed to fix it. We're not supposed to invalidate their feelings and kind of suppress their feelings. Yeah. So can you tell us now what are some of the options that we have?
Absolutely. So there's lots of things we can do. There's lots of strategies we can take. And the most important thing I would say to remember is slow down. Slow everything down. And first thing, really focus on, what is this student feeling? That's the most important question to ask yourself, because it can be really bamboozling and overwhelming. And what do I do? And I don't understand what they're saying half the time, because what are they even talking about? Because they're talking about something that happened online or whatever. Slow down, recognize what they're feeling, and validate the feeling. So this goes in any situation. Even if the student is acting out and doing something that's not okay, you still set a boundary, but you can say something like, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way, and it makes sense that you're so angry, or it makes sense that you're sad about that. It makes sense that it's scary to sit down and take this exam. It makes sense. That is the most important thing that young people need to know, because there's like two layers of reaction. They're having an emotional response, but then they're also freaking out about their emotional response. They're going, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? And their brain is firing a million miles a minute going, what's the danger here? That's our fight or flight response. Why am I feeling this way? How can I make this go away? And if we can just slow down and say, it's okay to feel this way, let's just sit with that feeling for a moment. Even just us saying, that's tough. I'm really sorry. That's a feeling. I felt that feeling too, and that's tough. Just that moment, sometimes that's all kids need. Then the second piece is giving them agency. So instead of us fixing it, help them figure out, what's one thing you can do right now. And this is the beautiful magic of it all, is we don't actually need the answer. It's actually more helpful if they come up with the answer. We can give suggestions. So sometimes if a young person is struggling, a student struggling with thinking of something, I say, well, here's some of the things I've tried. Would one of those be something that you want to do? And simple stuff. Do you think maybe you should say something to that friend that's upsetting you? Or do you think maybe you should just take a deep breath and take a break and then come back to this assignment, or whatever it is, and then get them to do that thing Doesn't matter what it is, it will give them agency. So they start learning, A, my feelings are valid, and B, I can help myself when I'm having a feeling. And then check in with them again. Hey, how did it go when you tried that thing? Because that's another thing that we don't do. Once the situation has passed, we never want to bring it up again. Because we're like, I don't want to upset them again. And that's, again, another really common, natural instinct. It's like, don't bring up stuff unless, they're coming to you with it. But again, if you bring it up again, then they have an experience of talking about something and reflecting on something when it's past. So all of a sudden their brain starts going, oh, I got through that, because kids forget what they've gone through, right? And so they only remember when they're in the painful thing again. And then all of their memories are of it being really painful. But if we can help them reflect on it and go, yeah, you got through that. That was amazing. You did that thing. It helped you. Yeah.
It also shows that you really care. 100%. I remember last year I had an incident. A girl came up to me. It was a bullying thing with some older kids from her brother in the middle school, and she was elementary, and she was being picked on. And I don't remember what originally happened, right? I think I just listened to her. I don't think I fixed it. I think I wasn't prepared for it. So I sort of, said, hey, reach out, to our counselor, reach out to him or her, choose one. And I can't, I'm sorry it's happening to you. And that's all I remember saying. And it sounds like that's okay for right now. I mean, until I maybe
100%.
take some more.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
But then,
that's a step she could take. Yeah.
Then to your point, it worked out so well because I didn't even really help her, I don't think. I just listened. And I shared feeling. I was like, oh, I got bullied. When I was younger, I had weird hair, like flock of seagulls hair, right? You guys remember the flock of seagulls? Imagine me with hair, first of all, and then I had like blonde hair. But it's not about me. I related to her a little story about being picked on by kids about what I looked like, and I think that was part of the source of the bullying. So to your point, though, a week later in the hallway, their class was passing. And I just looked at her, pulled her aside for a second, and say, hey, is this still happening? Did you get a chance to talk to somebody? Come back if you need to talk about it. And then she went on. And I was just like, in passing. And her eyes just lit up like little saucers. Yes. Like, oh my God, he remembers that something happened, and maybe, hopefully that worked out. But I was really hands off. As a specialist, I had 600 kids last year, and she went right by. But I remembered a week later and just mentioned just a question. Didn't even get an answer because she was sort of shocked that I even remembered. But I think that's a trigger for her to continue to maybe search 100%. Out for. Is that what you're
absolutely? Sort of... And I love to point out, I love this because you just described the exact steps that I was saying, and you also said, but I didn't really do anything. And I think that's really, really important. You listened and validated her feelings, and saying, hey, I've been through something similar is a really powerful form of validation. That's a really great thing. Again, it's not about dumping our issues onto them, but to say, hey, I found that hard. That's a really, sharing in that way is very powerful. So you validated. Then you suggested something for her to do. She is the one that went to see the counselor. You didn't do that for her. That's a skill to go and talk to someone about it. That's the skill. Then you checked in on her. And what I love about it is it can feel like we did nothing. That's honestly often what it feels like.
That's a great feeling, but
when we've done because you shouldn't be the one that's doing things. You're the one.
I don't have time.
No, and you're the one that's just reflecting back to them how powerful and amazing they are. That's all we need to do. And
I try to keep it on her. Yeah, and the thing is that I guess the other thing is that she doesn't know I didn't have time for her because she thinks, and if she's out there listening, hopefully she is not listening, but she probably thinks that I went and talked to the counselor about it, but I really didn't get a chance to follow up with anybody, but I empowered her, hopefully, that she went and worked it out, even if she didn't see somebody.
That's what matters. And honestly, the empowerment of I care about you and you've got this and I want to help you get there. Like I'm there with you along the way, but I'm not going to do it for you. I can't do it for you. But now she has this memory and experience of overcoming something.
Well, I think that was just luck. If that was in my toolbox, I'd be very proud. But I think it was more like that was just a good day for me, right? Oh my God, I'm glad I did the right thing. I didn't think about it. So hopefully that teachers and school systems, I would love it if our international school right now, Kent, I would love it if our school adopted this and reached out and tried it. All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the ITPexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show. I really would. Right.
Let's turn to one resource that all of us have, and that's your book, Finding the Words, by
Hayley,
Dr. Hayley Watson. It's Josie Bast. Did I say that correct? Is that your publisher?
That's right. Yeah.
Available both in print and digital.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could tell us about that book. First of all, what inspired you to write a book, and if you could tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So what inspired me was, I created the school resource first, and talking to teachers every day. Like I did a lot of professional development and a lot of, just communicating with teachers. And the question I get asked the most is, we give these frameworks, we give these skills, we give all these tools, and they're teaching the students, but they always come with, but there's this specific situation, and what do I actually say? Like, what are literally the words I use? And they really want the script. And I get it. I totally get it, because it's like, okay, I get the concepts. I get the concept of validation or empathy or whatever, but like literally, what do I say? And so
because they need to fake it till they make it. So they've got to get a little bit of the words.
Exactly. And so that's the whole concept, finding the words. How do we find those words? And so the beautiful thing about this book is it really just wrote itself, because in our program, as I said, we have documentary stories of real students sharing their stories. And so there's these case studies. And so I did all those interviews. And so for a couple of years, about 3 years, we traveled around. Our programs are primarily in Canada, the US, and Australia. So we traveled around interviewing young people. So we have all of these transcripts of these conversations and dialogues with hundreds of young people, and about sort of their journey and how they got through things. And so what we were able to do is analyze all those transcripts and pull out themes of what are the common things that help these young people reflect and find power in all of these things. And then literally the dialogue back and forth of how I engaged with them. And so in the book, you can flip to any chapter, and that's the idea. It's meant to be sort of like a guidebook. You get to the end of a day or a class, and you go, whoa, that kid seemed to be a little bit low. Let me flip to the sort of depression chapter. Or this kid was really acting out. Let me flip to that chapter. And you go to the chapter, you see a little bit, okay, these are the tools to use, but then you actually get to see the transcript of a dialogue with me and a student who's in that situation, and you get to see it broken down. And the part that everybody loves the most about the book, which is hilarious, is the part where I critique myself. Which I get also.
Everybody loves a critic.
Everybody loves a critic.
I didn't get to that point yet.
Yeah, so you see the dialogue, and then you get to see me saying, okay, this is why I said this, or, you know what, I wish I didn't say that.
Oh, that part. You said...
I should have said this. Yes.
Oh, because I have to admit, I read your book, or parts of it, okay. Yeah. And I was going through, and I'm going to read here for it, not read the whole thing, but just the title that I remember reading was, it's guiding students away from peer rivalry, right? Because as a homeroom teacher, I had some rivals one year, and very international too. I mean, there's some different sides. One was Ukraine, one was Russian, and they were in my same classroom, and the parents were sort of going at it. So a little background. But I was reading through this book, and what you're saying is so true. I love the section the part where you're going through and critiquing yourself. However, if I remember right, from reading this one is that you go through each chapter or each situation, you have a dialogue, and you say you're I believe in the beginning you said if you want to skip the critique and just go through the dialogue the first time,
Yeah.
it's a little easier. And I do recommend that to the readers to go through the dialogue, skip the parentheses or the thoughts that the metacognition, the thoughts that you have, and then go back later because you get the whole conversation that way. Isn't
Beautiful.
that what
Exactly. That's it. So you read it and you go, okay, and it's just an example because we need a template. We need okay, what is a
It's so
conversation that I
helpful.
could have? And then you can see, why did I make that choice? What was and also, and I think the reason why people love the critique so much is that it takes the pressure off. Like I'm a psychologist, so like I'm trained to do this and I mess it up all the time. You know,
went
like
to school for this stuff, man.
and I say the wrong thing and I do, and it doesn't matter. This is the part that's so important. If our heart's in the right place and we're well intentioned and we're trying with students, they give us so much grace. They really do. They really do, because they feel it. Their kids can see through the BS, they can see through, they can cut through, they can see if you mean well. And so, it's that permission, I think it gives people to go, okay, I have a template and know where I'm going, but also it's okay if I stumble and I can pick. And also, these conversations are going to happen in choppy ways. In a school, you might have 30 seconds, you might have 2 minutes. And that's okay too. You read it almost in a way that's great, because then you can go back and go, okay, I got this part out. Now, what part can I say next time? Okay, right. I remember to validate, but I didn't do anything else. Okay, next time maybe I'll ask if they have a skill that they want to use. So you can kind of really, these conversations can happen anyway in any order, but as long as we have that template, then in that one precious moment that we have, we're not just staring blankly at them or saying the thing that's probably not helpful, because we've practiced. Just like anything, we have that sort of toolbox, and something helpful will come out of our mouths.
So I have a question. In this resource kit, or the Open Parachute, I think is a program, do you have I don't know, posters or something that we can refer to as sort of a third talking point to take the pressure off the conversation? Like, hey, let's walk over to this and see if there's a tool here you could use.
100%. And we're actually really excited about that. We just came out with a whole bunch more of those. So absolutely. There's, we have a model that kind of we're teaching young people about how to use their mind and how to work with their emotions. And so that, that model is up. And then we have lots of, when we teach, especially with the young ones, when we teach breathing strategies and when we teach kind of mindfulness techniques. And then also, the older ones too, when we teach thought changing and whatever it is. Absolutely. We have posters and we have kind of those resources that, again, the whole goal of what we're trying to do is how do we make this easy for a teacher, so that really you're just doing the course of your day, but you're adding this layer of skill. And we also actually have a teacher training resource for that very purpose. If there isn't a class time set aside that you can teach this, here's some ways you can just embed it in your everyday classroom. And that has lots of posters and stuff in it too. So it's this idea of, schools come in all shapes and sizes. There's all different experiences that you have. How do we just find the cracks that we can add in something really valuable that positively impacts you as a teacher and makes your job easier, because your students are able to focus and concentrate more, which is what happens when we work on our mental health.
Dr. Hayley, it all makes so much sense to me that we have kids at school, that we have adults there who care about them and teach them, and that we should learn these skills and that we can help them, because you have your own experience as a adolescent who went through the pain that comes up in adolescence. Why do some people believe this does not belong in a school? Or, why is there pushback to what makes perfect sense, I think, to all of us?
This is another really good question.
Another great question, Kent. Wow.
This is something I think about so much, because you're absolutely right. You get these schools that are so switched on and on board, and then sometimes you get, a school or parents sometimes, or, sometimes teachers that are just not wanting it. And I get it. And I absolutely get it. And I do think part of the pushback is that it's uncomfortable. And again, it goes back to our own experiences. So if I've lived my whole life learning how to put a lid on it, And that's what gets me through my day. And that's
grow out of it, right? Or you'll grow out of it. We don't need to deal with this.
And so, but exactly. But if we think of a teacher or a parent or, a group, a superintendent or whatever, who knows that they've got where they've gotten in life because they have shut their own emotions down, which is one of the things that we do, right? And now you're asking me to go into this really uncomfortable place where all of a sudden these kids' emotions are all over the place, and it's this false belief that by talking about it, it makes it worse. This is the false belief. So we go, this is uncomfortable. We start talking about it. Now everybody's going to have their feelings everywhere. What are we going to do? How are we going to manage that? How are we going to contain it? But what we don't realize is that that's all happening anyways. We're never going to make it worse by talking about it. What's going to happen is it's just going to go under the radar. And then, oops, all of a sudden we have a student that's suicidal and we had no idea. Or oops, all of a sudden there's this bullying that's happening and no one's really realizing where it's coming from. Or we're having, these students are really aggressive. So we have this impression that we can just make it go away if we don't talk about it. And it makes us really uncomfortable.
I hear you saying that human emotions are, well, they're kind of messy. They're kind of scattered, and maybe people are a little bit scared of them. And, I know that there was a study out of the UK that they tried to say that some of the programs there, SEL, social emotional learning programs, made social emotional problems worse. But what I hear you saying is it maybe will bring things to the surface that maybe weren't already, people were unaware of.
Exactly. And that's a really important point. It's almost like it needs to get worse before it gets better a little bit, because one of the biggest challenges for young people, and this is for all of us, is we don't have an awareness of what we're really struggling with. And so the first step is developing the awareness. Now that's painful to go, oh, that's what I'm doing. That's not helpful. That's what's causing me this grief. So that step is not a fun step. The same thing when I first started therapy, which is true for probably anyone that's been in therapy. The first bit is so uncomfortable. It's like someone's showing a mirror in your face and you're going, I do not like what I see. This sucks. And so things come out and you start feeling bad and all of these things. That's happened to me anyway. I was like, I had that locked down. Now all of a sudden it's open. But if you don't go through that journey, then you never get to that whole place. It's like if you have a knee injury and you're like, I'm never going to do the exercises because they hurt. And then great. So you don't have pain in the moment, but then you have that knee injury probably for your whole life and it's always going to be there. So that's the part that we kind of don't quite understand as a culture. And I think it comes from the fact that we haven't gone through it personally necessarily. Like, again, it's these cultural patterns. It's throwing that in the face and saying, hey, you know what, actually, we do need to go there if we want to get to this future reality where we actually have whole, healthy, well-rounded young people who can make conscious decisions about their life and being kind to each other and being, self-aware.
So, Hayley, I have a question. A lot of our audience are going to be international teachers, international school leaders. And one of the challenges is that many of us have many cultures in our school. I know a lot of cultures where talking about your feelings is frowned upon, or admitting that you're going to therapy is like a big taboo. So do you have some insight on what teachers, if the teachers are on board, the school administrators are on board, but what do we say to those parents that are from cultures where we don't talk about this?
A great question. So that's one of the reasons why we have our parent resources too, because you do get that. You do have parents. And even if you're in, Canada, the US, or Australia, there's lots of parents from lots of different cultures in those schools too, saying, hang on a minute, I don't know if I'm that into this. So the biggest thing that we do is show them what it actually is, because I think it's the idea of mental health and emotions and all those things that's the scariest part. But when you actually break it down, because the skills that we're teaching are really helpful for parents. And so we have parent resources that kind of talk them through that. But it's sort of saying, okay, so your child gets upset a lot and they're and they lash out a little bit. we're helping them learn a skill set where maybe they kind of get a little bit more aware of that, and maybe they learn to treat others with a little bit more respect, or they learn to treat themselves with a little bit more respect. And when they actually see what they're teaching, go, oh, that's amazing. I want, and so we're empowering the parents too with, I want my kid to learn this skill set because, hey, they're actually going to be more pleasant in the home, and we're going to have a more engaged relationship. And so I think that, and it's very, very normal for parents to sort of have that feeling of, well, what are you teaching my child? And so we need to make sure we don't keep parents in the dark. We need to say, okay, this is the skill set. This is why. This is how you can be a participant in this, and you can help reinforce this. And this is how it's going to help you in your relationship and dynamic. Because again, it's not about teaching any kind of dogma or teaching any kind of one way of viewing things. It's really teaching critical thinking skills. That's kind of, when you think about what mental health skills really are, it's about being able to critically think when you're emotionally triggered, to be able to go, wait a minute, what's happening? What is really happening inside of me? What just happened in that interaction? And what do I want to do to navigate this in a helpful way?
And I would imagine if you're focusing on the general, like, we want a better person with the parents, then you're not identifying, and they're not going to think, oh, here's these psychologists or these people trying to fix the kids that have problems, because they start pointing fingers at other kids. But if you talk about just in general, we want to have your student to be a general, like a great citizen of the world, and be a good person. And if we focus on that, then we can also weed out and start to identify the other ones that need to really focus on their mental health and all the diagnoses that are out there. But if it's packaged sort of like, this is for everybody.
For everyone, exactly.
Right? Is that how you guys do it?
100%. And I think that's really important anyways in general, because this idea of segmenting people and labeling people as, you know, this, that, or the other, yes, we need those, and those diagnoses can be very helpful. But at the heart of it, we need to all recognize that we're all the same. I mean, that's a really important lesson for any of us to remember. At the heart of it, we're all human, we all struggle, and we all need a skill set to be able to be kind to ourselves and to other people. And so it's about all of us. It's not about, you know, because if we keep that segregated view, then you either want to be the kid that doesn't have a problem, so you shut it down, or you maybe need the support, so you feel like you have to have this label and you have to be really, really bad in order to get that support. So it almost like separates kids more in that way, to be more extreme or to hide it even further.
Is there other resources that our listeners can go to find out more, to connect with your project? Do you have a website?
Yeah, absolutely.
Social media?
So, yes. So openparachuteschools.com is the website, and that has all the information about our resources and the book. And then I should be better on social media. The main social media that I use is, shouldn't we all? I use LinkedIn is the primary one that I use. So Dr. Hayley Watson on LinkedIn. I am on a few other platforms, but I'm
that's the best one.
That's the best one if you want to kind of connect to me. But yeah, I love international schools. We work with a few international schools. I also just love international teachers. I think it's a really interesting bunch of.
Aren't we amazing? Yeah,
you really are.
Maybe you could travel internationally, visit some of the schools that maybe sign up for your program. You'd go and visit them, maybe. All right.
100%. I love. That's one of our big visions. So we're in Canada, Australia, and the US now. Our big vision is to keep extending that. And of course, our programs can be used anywhere, but we want to keep extending our reach.
We have listeners in over 120 countries, just so you know.
Lovely.
We do have quite a few. You're our one of our post 100th episode interviews. We just celebrated. It's about to come out in a couple weeks. We're going to have our 100th episode.
Amazing.
And we have lots of listeners all over the place.
Amazing.
I can't believe how wonderful this has been so far. And we're going to keep our eye on time here, but I love what you're talking about, because it reaches out to every educator, and every staff member of a school would benefit from what you've been talking about. I wish you were at our school. I wish you were in our team. I mean, I love reading the book. I really do, and it's worth a good read for anybody, because you can like you said, you can pick apart pieces. Like if something happens and I want to sort of deflate and think about it, I can check back in the book and see if there's a chapter in there about it. And maybe if it's not in there, maybe I'd shoot you a LinkedIn message or something and say, do you have another resource?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to flood you with that, but I'm just thinking outside the box here, right?
Greg and Hayley, 2-line communication.
I have a problem with Kent. Should I just slow down, Kent? I really appreciate what's going on with you, Kent. It's real and it's authentic, and what you're feeling is okay, Kent. So I
myself have felt that frustration, Kent, with dealing with Greg. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
She's reaching out. I need a couch, doctor. I need a couch.
You've got it.
Well, something I was thinking about when you were talking about giving the tools to the teachers, because a lot of times they're the first responder, they're the ones that are being approached. It got me thinking about, those little first aid kits we all have in our classroom. Like when a kid cuts themselves, you're not sending them to the school doctor right away. You're going to try and treat it yourself.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking that's sort of the same thing, but this time it's mental health instead of physical health.
Exactly. I love that analogy. Exactly.
What a connection there.
Yeah, such a good
JP.
connection. Yes. We talk about CPR sometimes too, right? Like if something's happening in the moment, but I think your analogy is better because it's about those little things.
Band-aids.
It's like the little cut, the Band-Aid.
Not surgery.
When does this need a Band-Aid? And probably some instances need a Band-Aid and then they need follow-up, but somebody is there. And this is the part that I think we forget when we try to say that shouldn't belong in a school system. We can't keep it out of a school system because the situation will happen at school. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of ignorance to say, let's keep it out of school. That just puts more pressure on the teachers because they're like, okay, so this shouldn't be happening, but it is. And so what do? Pretend this kid isn't bleeding in front of me? Do I make my own Band-Aid out of, I don't know, the stapler?
Scotch tape.
Duct tape.
Crazy glue.
I don't know what I'm doing here. Right. So it's sort of, it really is leaving teachers in a terrible position if we try to assume that this is not going to happen and we should keep this dialogue out of a school setting.
Well, I could definitely see, as a former admin myself, I could definitely see a dedicated PD day or two, getting all the staff, getting the training, so that they're all comfortable with these conversations. They're going to happen, but now how do you deal with it when it happens?
Absolutely. And it's really also remembering that it's a journey, because again, for a lot of us, if this is the first time we're asked to do this, it's going to be a bit of a fumbling mission at first, and that's okay. So it's really, we like to work with schools on like a 5-year plan. So it's like, don't assume that all your teachers are going to feel comfortable with this, and that's okay. So you'll have some, usually in a school, you'll have some teachers that are just gung-ho, love it, totally into it. And then you'll have some teachers that are, okay, I'm willing to try. And then some teachers are like, whoa, this is way too much for me. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but we meet a school where they're at and say, okay, well, this is the plan. Maybe the first year for a lot of schools is, let's just focus on the teachers. We have teacher well-being. We have the training resources. Let's start really, really light. And then we have our lessons range from the very, very simple, 5-minute to 10-minute simple kind of exercises all the way through to let's really dig into like, what is anxiety and how do we help ourselves? So we have like the range. So I think that's important too, because a lot of schools are like, well, we're not ready to create a class yet, or we're not ready to, and that's okay. Again, like everything, does that mean we don't do anything? No, it means we take the first step and then we keep taking, steps so that 5 or 10 years down the road, we can go, yeah, we have this thriving community in our school that is really aware and has this shared language, but we might have started somewhere, very different from that 5 years ago.
I could see one of the challenges would be, especially for international circuit, is the turnover, the staff turnover, the 2-year contracts. But I also think that, as you say, if you have early adopters and then you have kind of that middle stream, by the time that the 2 years are up, then you've got new contracts coming in, but you have like half the school or something on board, and now they're willing to train the new staff.
You want to create the school environment around this, and it's going to be everybody's sort of, it takes a village, right?
Exactly. And what I've found is when you have that, when you have this, the team, at least some of the team that are on board, and the leadership is really switched on and on board, you know, you can create that environment. And if you come into a school and this is the way we do things in this school, that's, you know, then you go, okay, I can adjust, and you learn, and then hopefully you have the experience that most teachers have, where they go, actually, this is a really much nicer teaching experience because I have this dialogue with my students and they're a little bit more able to help themselves. And so my time isn't spent, you know, feeling confused about this or trying to put out fires all the time. So, you know, again, it's just getting over that hump of trying it and seeing and getting through those first little bit where it's, wow, this is different. and then it hopefully starts to feel really good and makes everything a little bit better in that school environment.
Well, I think if they start with the book, from what I've read, what little I've read of it, I've read quite a bit, but not enough. And I think that what's going to be great about it is that it's stuff that can go right away. I feel like I could go tomorrow and deal with the paper, you know, have my little med kit ready for that situation. Awesome. I hope. I think it's just going to I'll need some training. I think I would like to read more in depth and think more about it before it happens, but you never know. It could happen tomorrow. But I think I'm better prepared even after reading parts of your book that I've chosen. And then later on, if things do happen this year, I have something to a resource to fall back on.
Beautiful.
Right.
And I think the thing to remember is that is how it goes, right? We're never going to feel like, right, I'm totally 100% ready until we've done it a whole bunch of times. I think it's, and that's the part. So just having done exactly what you did is perfect. You read a little bit, you go, okay, I think I have a little bit of an understanding. Let me have a few conversations. Let me see how that felt. And then we go back again and go, oh, okay, maybe that could have been different. Or yeah, okay, great, that's switch on. And then the confidence builds up. So you probably know, and I think this is true for all teachers, you know way more than you think, because a lot of this stuff is human interactions, and you're great at being a human. You're great at getting through challenges yourself.
Yeah, but I can always be better. Kent can always be better. I think, you know, and I joke around it, but Kent has got great relationships with his kids most every year. And I go in there and I have his kids as specials. So they really do have good relationships with Kent. I think the book opens up and makes you think about this. And the other point I have to make, and I keep stressing the book because I love books. I know Kent does and JP. But the idea is that it's hard to sell it to a school. Right? It's hard to sell a program to your school as a teacher, but I think my tools so far are from, if I can't get our school to go into the parachute program, at least I can read the book and arm myself. Do you know what I mean?
Beautiful. Love it. Exactly. Because as a teacher, you don't necessarily always have the sway over the school. I wish that sometimes you did more, but absolutely. But this is something you can do. So it's like there's school level things, but then there's individual things. And that's, again, that journey. We all need that agency of what can I do in this situation? If the system is not quite what I want it to be, what can I do? And then we get enough people making that individual change, then that's what tips the balance. That's when schools start to go, wait a minute, what is this thing that, you know, all of these teachers are interested in? The same things happen in districts or even in provinces or states. Oh, why are all these schools using this program? Oh, you know, and then it's sort of like that grassroots approach. Oh, maybe it's something we should look at.
Here's the new Greg. I'm going to interrupt you for a second here. Here's the new Greg on video. Right, Kent, JP, the new Greg, and I'm reaching out to our listeners. And you know what I'm saying, Dr. Hayley? I'm saying our listeners should email us and let us know about this episode and let us know what kind of system they're using for social emotional. If it's something like what you're talking about, what system are they using? Right? Beautiful. What do we use Second Step at our school? I don't know if you've heard. I'm sure you've heard of that one. And it's a carrot instead of the stick mainly, but that's very watered down. But in a nutshell, I'm not sure I like it. I don't know. It works. It's a tool in the box, right? But I'd like to know from our listeners, reach out to us on the International Teacher Podcast at gmail.com and let us know. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn. I think with Dr. Hayley, let her know what you're using for a system at your school internationally so that you can hear from feedback from some of our listeners maybe. So let's do that. That's the new Greg, Dr. Hayley. I'm reaching out to our audience to try and get feedback from them, right?
Beautiful.
Okay.
I love it.
I am keeping an eye on the time. I am going to ask each of you for your final thoughts, and we'll end with you, Dr. Hayley. JP Mint, final thoughts for today?
Well, I know for one, I am going to be looking up that book and seeing what you have. I really like the idea that it's indexed, sort of that you can pick and choose the chapter that talks to you. So thank you so much for coming on today. Greg, final thoughts?
Well, I'm going to try out some of these things tomorrow on Kent, right? When he comes up to me, I'm going to be like, I'm going to slow down with Kent. Kent, slow down. It's okay. No, but in all seriousness, thank you, Dr. Hayley. I learned a lot from having you on our show, and I hope to get you back on our show at some point in the future. Check back with you, see how you're doing with your international schools, especially. Okay.
Dr. Hayley, final thoughts?
Oh, I'm just very thrilled to be here. It was so great to chat to you. And like I said, I really think the international teaching audience is such a unique and interesting one, full of trailblazers, full of people that have a lot of courage and think outside the box. And I do think it is the perfect place to make waves and do things differently, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be our program, but it's I just want to encourage everyone to keep, just like you push the boundaries in your own life, being courageous, living in different places, push the boundaries with mental health. Let these kids learn from you that you can go to places that are scary and it can help you become sort of a stronger person. So I'd like to leave it there. So thank you so much.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And that'll bring us to our close. I'm Kent the Cat Guy. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank our special guest, Dr. Hayley Watson. Her book is called Finding the Words, Empowering Struggling Students Through Guided Conversations. You can get that at www.amazon.com or wherever you find your finer books. You can also find out more about her program, openparachuteschools.com. Once again, that's openparachute.com. So openparachuteschools.com. Thank you, Dr. Hayley Watson.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I'd also like to thank JP Mint. You can find JP Mint at jpmintconsulting.com. Thank you, JP Mint. I would also like to thank Greg Lemoyne for joining us. He also wrote a book, but that's not, we're just going to leave that to the side. You
can't remember the title anyway.
Wait till it ends up in the bookshelf of the
or
used
either
books
book.
in your school cafeteria. Pick it up. Wipe the spaghetti off it and read it. Greg Lemoyne, author, wrote a book. Go buy it. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll find you in room 30.
What is it? What is my new room?
I can't remember. Is it 308?
304.
Nope. I'm Kent the Cat Guy. You can find me in room 303. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much.